Silver, Jonathan Klein, Betty-Olson-Jones.
Thank you, and I just first of all wanted to appreciate Vernon's presentation and the looking at the Tier 3 resource, so that assuming that it does not pass, to recommend that we use the Tier 3 flexibly to minimize the cuts, I think is a great thing. So I just want to outline that as like something totally support. I think that the one other thing that's not necessarily in the presentation, and I think was mentioned by David Kakashiba, was the Title I and the categorical resources. As we think about how we make sure that cuts are away from the people that are furthest away from opportunity, I'm concerned. Because in looking at budget cuts, even at a school site like ours, with a $1.8 million budget, we got the sheet and it's about a $200,000 cut. So it's actually over 10% is our cut because of the categorical cut. The categorical cut in Title I is over 20%, and the SCE and the LEP or the SCE cuts are pretty significant as well. So just to name that, whatever we can do as we look at our Title I dollars to figure out how to make sure that every single Title I dollar is pushed out to our schools, I would just advocate as we go forward in this process. The second piece is that, you know, it is true that central office got significant cuts, and I really, that those things are affected. At the end of the day, the kids and the people that are closest to children need to be prioritized. And so it may be the case that we need to have 0% cuts at Central, but I think we really deserve to look at the budgets at Central and have the community be able to engage in that discussion before it's a decision first. So in the spirit of transparency, that would be what we would ask as principals. While we're getting a 7 to 10% cut and a potential 0% at Central, we would like to see what those budgets are and be able to have an opportunity to look at that as we go.
I don't have I'm Jonathan Klein representing Great Oakland Public Schools. I don't have too much more to add to that. This has been a pretty heavy evening. I have been just really aware of my privilege and the privilege of my kids as white folks in Oakland tonight. And so I was planning on coming up here just to talk about two values. One is that for a long time this board has stood, as Mr. Silver talked about, for keeping the cuts that we've all been enduring as far away from kids as possible. And right now, principals are out working with their staffs to make all of the cuts for next year. And so I would just want to second that request that going forward, and I know this is just a moment in the process and we have more to go, that we have to look at, like tonight's presentation, it was just unrestricted dollars. It wasn't categoricals, and it was just sites. And I think we have to look at both sides, you know, Central and sites every time we look at these things, and we have to look at categorical and unrestricted dollars, because it's just you have to see the trade-offs. And it feels like the burden should be on the central office to be that much more specific about what we are funding in service of children at school sites, because we all are painfully aware of the kinds of cuts. It's very concrete for us what school sites are going to be cutting. Class size reduction, intervention, all kinds of things. And particularly with the board's priority around teacher retention, we know that so many of the drivers of teacher retention are site-based conditions. They are those class sizes, they are prep periods, they are collaboration time, all that stuff. So this has been a good discussion, and I'm looking forward to just seeing more information come out, and just want to kind of affirm the values of transparency around all of the budget in these conversations, and working as much as possible to keep the resources at school sites.
Thank you, Betty-Olson-Jones, OEA President. I really have to agree with the last two speakers. It's been a really interesting evening. It's incredibly complex, and I want to especially thank Vernon, Hal, for a lot of the transparency that we've seen. I find budgets extremely complicated, especially when you're not just looking at numbers, you're looking at the human beings that are attached to every number. I want to echo what the previous two speakers said about the classroom at the center. I know that Central took a lot of hits. I do also agree that we need to see some real clear, exact accounting of exactly what goes on at Central that directly relates to the school site. We're not in times that we've ever been in before. I go out to school sites all the time and I talk to teachers and principals and I just hear the anguish. I talked to a principal the other day who said, my school cannot continue as it is. This will kill my school if I have to make these cuts. I think being compounded by RBB makes it even more anguishing because each separate school is facing that feeling of being cut, killed. How can we continue? It's true, teacher retention in this climate, the conditions are what keep people at schools. We've been having intense discussion about that in the Effective Teacher Task Force. A couple things that I've been bringing up in that task force and in conversations with people. Teachers uniformly, pretty much, hate the district benchmark assessment tests. They're basically indicators of how kids will do on the CSTs. I think most of us agree the CSTs are a snapshot, a necessary one under NCLB, but we don't have to do all the non-state mandated assessments. That could certainly save, I think last year you figured about $1.5 million. I think there are ways that we can look at to try and shift more of that money into the sites, specifically around giving teachers time they need for collaboration, for planning, for professional development that does not have to be done by outside contractors. So I'll just stop there.